All right, our multi-generational ministry moment today is a story. It's called The Gift of Nothing by Patrick McDonnell. Are you going to try and share it, or shall I just read it? Okay. All right, there it is. The pictures the texts are never for you to read. The pictures are a little small. I tried to enlarge them, so maybe you'll have to listen more than look. In any event, it was a special day, and Mooch wanted to give his best friend Earl a gift. But what to get him? He had a bowl, he had a bed, he had a Chewy toy. He had it all. Mooch thought and thought, what do you get someone who has everything? He thought, nothing. He would give Earl the gift of nothing. But in this world filled with so many somethings, where could he find a nothing? Mooch often heard Frank say there was nothing on TV, but as far as Mooch could tell, there was always something on TV. Mooch often heard Doozy and her friends say there was nothing to do. But as far as Mooch could tell, everybody was always doing something. Millie came home from the store and said, there was nothing to buy. So Mooch went shopping. Mooch looked up and down every aisle. He found many, many, many somethings. The latest this, the newest that. But as far as he could tell, nothing was not for sale. So Mooch went home and sat on his pillow and just stayed still, as cats often do. And, not looking for it, he found nothing. So he went and got a box, and he put nothing in it. Then Mooch thought, maybe Earl deserves more than this. So he got a bigger box. Now that's plenty of nothing. For me? Said Earl. Mooch, you didn't have to get me anything. Who told him? Thought Mooch. Earl opened Mooch's gift. There's nothing in here, said Earl. Yes, said Mooch, nothing. But me and you. So Mooch and Earl just stayed still and enjoyed nothing and everything. I'm grateful to be able to use today's sermon, which we have permission to use because Reverend Krista is sick. This sermon is called "'Tis the Season to Be Mindful," and it was written by Reverend Sandra Fees. Last week, I went to hear guitarist Leo Kotke and the Turtle Island String Quartet at the Scottish Rite Cathedral in West Reading. They were playing carols and songs representing the various winter festivals: Hanukkah, Diwali, Christmas, winter solstice. The quartet is up for a Grammy Award. As the concert began, I was restless. Even though the space is large and modern and the seating is pretty comfortable, I just couldn't seem to get comfortable. I kept crossing and uncrossing my legs and crossing and uncrossing my arms. I rearranged my coat. I sunk deeper into my seat. I leaned to the right. I leaned to the left. I sat up straight. At some point, I realized I was fidgeting, and the people around me weren't. I looked around the cathedral. It seemed like everybody else in that space was completely still and silent, except for me and the musicians. While I squirmed, the rest of the room was riveted on the music, so I tried really hard not to move, to just sit still. Have you ever tried that in the midst of fidgeting? Well, it doesn't work well, and it didn't work well then. I was there to hear the music, but I was really unable to be attentive to it because there was something else distracting me. The stress and busyness of the season and of the day was arising in me. I seemed to be physically restless, but it was in truth my mind that was racing in all directions. You could say it was almost like I wasn't really there at all. After trying to ignore what was happening to me, I gave up. I acknowledged to myself that I was feeling restless and that I was worrying about some things. Once I realized that, I could embrace it and then begin to attend to the music right there in my midst. I began to notice that the musicians seemed to really enjoy playing together. I noticed how they interacted with one another. I noticed how they held their instruments with a kind of reverence. I heard the soulful, jazzy sounds of the quartet, and suddenly I was fully present to the music. I became conscious of the beauty of their playing. It would be wonderful if we could be mindful all of the time, day in and day out, living in a deep awareness. I have always thought that being attentive and mindful should be a simple matter. It seems like it should be as natural as breathing, but it really isn't. It is hard work. It takes time. But it is something we all have the capability to do if we choose to. Buddhist teacher and author Jack Kornfield says, mindfulness is an innate human capacity to deliberately pay full attention to where we are, to our actual experience, and to learn from it. Mindfulness is at the heart of Buddhist teaching. The technique of mindfulness directs our attention to the present, allowing us to experience it more deeply and more fully. Rather than drifting through our lives on automatic pilot, we notice our thoughts, our experiences, and actions. Kornfield says, much of our day we spend on automatic pilot. People know the experience of driving somewhere, pulling up to the curb, and all of a sudden realizing, wow, I was hardly aware I was even driving. How did I get here? When we pay attention, it is gracious, which means there is space for our joys and sorrows, our pain and losses, all to be held in a peaceful way. Being mindful creates space for all the emotions and events of our lives. We may mistakenly think it is a feel-good kind of thing. Actually, mindfulness draws us closer to the trouble as well as the joy of the people and situations we encounter. When we begin to notice, when we awaken to the world around us, we also open our hearts to some harsh realities and to the range of human suffering. Busyness and stress is one reason we operate on autopilot, but pain is another reason we sometimes sleepwalk through our lives. If we have experienced abuse or mental illness, if we have deep pain and loss, being mindful will require us to engage that pain. This can be enormously risky and scary. I sometimes hear people say they don't read the paper or watch the news because it is just too painful. I sometimes feel that way too. News of the world's suffering can be overwhelming, and our response can be to flee from the grief and pain. But turning away from friends, from family, from the world, doesn't help anyone. It doesn't even really help us. We all know that. It isn't possible to shut out the pain. In all kinds of ways, the world still seeps into our lives. We might question how much it matters that we pay attention to the world's suffering. Any of us who have been a companion to a person in pain or has had someone do that for us knows that just the simple act of bearing witness to another person's pain can make a tremendous difference. Margaret Wheatley says, "It doesn't make the suffering go away, although it sometimes changes the experience of pain and grief. When I bear witness, I turn toward another and am willing to let their experience enter my heart. I step into the picture by being willing to be open to their experience, to not turn away my gaze." Mindfulness can be healing in this way. It can open us to human suffering and the possibility of transformation. When we are mindful, we notice the subtle expressions on the faces of those we love. We notice when a dear friend says she is okay, but something else is stirring beneath the surface. We see the beauty of a thin beaded layer of ice on a tree branch and encounter a moment of transcending wonder. We stop to smell the freshly ground coffee and give thanks for a glorious morning. We look into the despairing face of a person in need rather than turning away. Our hearts may be aching from all we cannot do, but our hearts are uplifted by our expressions of compassion and care. Even though we may sometimes want to avoid or deny the world around us, most of us would like to have a greater awareness in our lives, if only we had the time or knew how. In his book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh describes the practice of mindfulness in our daily life. He says, "When you are walking along a path leading into a village, you can practice mindfulness. Walking along a dirt path surrounded by patches of green grass, if you practice mindfulness, you will experience that path, the path leading into the village. You practice by keeping this one thought alive. I am walking along the path leading into the village." You keep that one thought, but not just repeating it like a machine over and over. Machine thinking is the opposite of mindfulness. If we're really engaged in mindfulness while walking along the path to the village, then we will consider the act of each step we take as an infinite wonder, and a joy will open in our hearts like a flower, enabling us to enter the world of reality. When we are walking, we are aware of our walking. When we are washing dishes, we are aware of washing dishes. When we are listening to music, we are aware of listening to the music. This is what it means to be present. A regular meditation practice can facilitate this, but we do not need to learn to meditate to be mindful. We can bring an attitude of mindfulness to any of our daily activities. The important thing is to keep our consciousness alive to the present reality, rather than focusing on the past or the future, rather than worrying about some other time or place. We pay attention to the life we are living now. Rather than multitasking, making dinner, helping our children with their homework, watching television, checking email all at the same time, we make a choice to fully engage in whatever task is at hand. This is a great time of year for us to focus on being more mindful. It is a time when we are especially bombarded with busyness and excess, while what we desperately long for is a meaningful observance that emphasizes people, spirituality, and endearing traditions. When asked what they want at this time of year, over 80% of Americans say they fantasize about simple gifts, natural decorations, a fire, traditional food, leisurely schedules, music, time spent out of doors, and an emphasis on family activities. It is just a little before Christmas, but it is not too late to bring the miracle of mindfulness to this season. We can deepen our awareness of our own thoughts and actions. We can model mindfulness for our children and work to create traditions that reflect our values. We can notice what we cherish about the season and what is depleting our spirits. We can pay attention to what matters most to us and what is less important. What we learn can help us shape our lives in ways that bring deeper significance now and throughout the coming year. We can spend times on the activities that nourish us and with the people who nurture us and need our nurturing. We can become awakened to ourselves, the human condition, and the world. 'Tis the season to be mindful. I hope every day you will, at least in some little way, take time to awaken the world around you. May it be so in your lives.